Why do you think we're only now getting to that point where we can start to comfortably feel vulnerable?
I sort of think the world or the community is more accepting now of people's flaws than maybe they once were.
You mentioned you can't teach empathy. You can't teach vulnerability. Can you teach people how to ask the right questions?
I think you can teach them how to ask the right questions. If they approach whatever they just heard from their set of values, how does that inform their values?
Whenever I think about some of the strongest leaders, they're the ones that have the courage to step into a new room, a new team, and get vulnerable, get raw and real first.
So to create a safe environment, you as a leader need to create a sense of it's okay to tell me difficult things.
You're not going to know everything. Just jump into it.
Trust is the most important thing. And if you get trust right, everything else just falls into place.
Leadership isn't a position. It's a presence. It begins when you stop striving to be known and start striving to be worth knowing. Rod Branch, you, my friend, are worth knowing. Welcome to the Way of the Wolf.
Thanks so much, Sean. I'm really excited to be here. I do love that quote. I might have written it. I don't know.
Yeah. It probably sticks out just a little bit.
Right.
First and foremost, I want to share my appreciation for having an opportunity to read through some of these chapters. I was glued. To it. And I loved how you were able to share stories from your life and then weave it into the reflections and the lessons that you have learned with the intent to genuinely lift other people up.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to do with the book, and the people who were my advanced reader copy people, that came away with that impression. I was very happy because that's where I wanted people to end up with the book, and it's such a unique, I think it's unique combination of memoir, life lesson, weak starter. So weak-minded became a theme throughout it, and ended up being the title at the end. Yeah.
What prompted you to write the book?
I read Dr. Tara Marie Stayskell's book, and she is a very vulnerable writer and very courageous writer, and a person who was great at encouraging you to tell your story. And so I wrote some more vulnerable stories out on LinkedIn, and the reaction I got, the more vulnerable I got, the bigger the reaction I got, and it was really touching people. And they were saying, "When's the book coming out? I want more stories like that." And then I started thinking deeply about the lessons that the book conveys, and it sort of opened a door to, there's that story, and there's that story, and that has that meaning. And then when I got to the end, there were 52 stories, but I thought, I think there's some themes running in here. And so I condensed it down to 4 different themes, and it worked out beautifully. Yeah, that's how I got there.
I want to dig into the vulnerability piece and how this started with you sharing a few short stories on LinkedIn and how it started getting traction. The thing that I've noticed as we look at trends and the macro backdrop is we're moving towards this world of just instant gratification, go, technology. And it's almost like we're losing touch with our humanity, our ability to be vulnerable. Because when we look at other social media platforms, it's just their highlight reel. And nobody wants to acknowledge, that's just the highlight reel. The real reel is this, and that involves being vulnerable. And I think in the past few years, we're starting to see this trend where people are like, thank you. I'm not the only one that's struggling out here. Why do you think we're only now getting to that point where we can start to comfortably feel vulnerable?
I sort of think the world or the community is more accepting now of people's flaws than maybe they once were, and people are much more courageous than they once were. And I think the younger generations, it's almost I don't care, what you think. Here's me, kind of thing. And I think the older generations are seeing that and getting some courage from that. But also, there's there's a leadership model that I built that started with caring. There's actually a chapter in there on just caring and how important that is as a center value for everything else about leadership. Caring, trust, respect, empathy, vulnerability. That's the order of things. Obviously, it can change a little bit person to person, but I reach vulnerability before I ever get to psychological safety. So to create a safe environment, you as a leader need to create a sense of it's okay to tell me difficult things. It's okay to be you in a difficult way, to share problems, to say, hey, I know I went to this training last week and I'm supposed to know this, but I forgot. I don't know how to do this now. So I think a lot of things are happening in the world where it's almost impossible to maintain that social media persona that's flawless out there. People are going to be looking at it going, yeah, but you got these other things going on. So I think the world is bending a little bit and people are getting braver about doing it. And I think we're more accepting as a community.
That vulnerability piece, whenever I think about some of the strongest leaders, they're the ones that have the courage to step into a new room, a new team, and get vulnerable, get raw and real first. And I'm flashing back to, I had an opportunity to do a leadership workshop with a CHRO and her team a while back. And there was challenges with trust amongst the team. And there were a few teams in the room, actually. But there were some challenges around trust. And the CHRO went out on a limb and shared some knowledge that she had that had it become public that she shared that knowledge, she probably would have lost her job. She put herself out there. And I paused and I said, hey, for all of you in the room, I want you to understand the gravity of what just happened. This is a signal of how much she trusts, respects, and admires all of you. Then the question becomes, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to lean into it? Are you going to become real and raw and vulnerable? Because that is the way that you strengthen a team. You build an unbreakable team and culture. And it shook me that she had the courage to do that. And very few leaders will do that. And that was, one of the things early on in my HR career, because, I spent most of my life in IT and then about a decade ago started leading human resources. But that was something that I was petrified to do. And the first time I shared something that I was told not to share, I was mortified and scared and petrified, like, what have I just done? Yeah. And it didn't come back to bite me in the ass. Yeah. No, it served me and my team because immediately there's that trust.
Yeah. I applaud what you did in that meeting, and I think the world's going to need more of that going forward, inviting people, which is an inclusion factor. It's part of DEI. And I know some people have made that a bad word, but it's still applicable, certainly in the inclusion part of it. And I think that's the most important part of DEI is the inclusion part, getting all those ideas on the table. And so extending the story that you just told, once that vulnerability is broken and people feel safe to say things, more information appears on the table, more information with gravitas that you can make decisions on. And I think I even talk about don't be afraid to take a job you don't know how to do, and the imposter syndrome that comes with that. And frankly, when I got to the end of the book, I thought, if you're not walking around with some level of imposter syndrome, you're not trying hard enough. You're not taking big enough chances. You're not accepting big enough challenges. And I think about that a lot now, and give people a lot of grace around that. When they're in meetings and they're sharing difficult things, difficult stories, and just like you did, you recognized in the moment how difficult that was for that person and how critical it was for the people around the table to understand this isn't information we go out and talk about, but it's information we use in this room, and feel free to share, that kind of thing. So, and I even think back to Brene Brown's work around knowers and learners. And, the knower comes in and tells everybody the answer. The learner comes in and asks all the great questions. And the great questions leads to the vulnerability. So that whole thing is tied up together. And at the risk of talking too much here, I know it's a podcast, but, Adam Grant talks about being a quilter. And I picked up on that word because that's exactly what I am. I take these snippets of information and I find it a puzzle to connect them. And all of this stuff's related. Brene Brown's work's connected, when she was obviously the mother of vulnerability in her first podcast, but I find so many other connections along that same line, and imposter syndrome and taking chances and accepting roles that people think you'll be good at and you're not sure, and you take it anyway, and then it turns out they knew what they were talking about.
There's so much that I want to unpack from what you just shared. Okay, first and foremost, taking the job that you don't know how to do. And as you were talking through this, I had an epiphany, because people were asking me, what prompted you to feel confident enough to step out of IT and start leading human resources? And at the time, I thought, you know what? I needed a challenge. IT just kind of came easy to me. We didn't really have any major issues. I'd been doing it for almost 2 decades. It just kind of came easy to me. And I thought, you know what? I need a challenge. And as you were talking through that, I flashed back to 17 years or so ago, the first time I landed an IT manager job. I basically was coming off of a job where I worked IT support on the help desk. Interviewed for this role, met with the CEO of the company. It was a small oil and gas company that had about 140 or so employees. And he's showing me around the office, walks into the server room. He opens up the server room door and he said, "Hey, this is our server closet." And there was like 15 servers and routers and switches there. He's like, "Can you manage this?" I was like, "Oh yeah, for sure." I had no clue. I had no clue what to do with it. I lived on Google for months just trying to figure out how to navigate it. But there was an element of stepping out of my comfort zone while still being in my comfort zone, because I kind of knew technology and was comfortable with it, but I had to stretch. Now, going from IT to HR, there was a little bit of a different dynamic for me at the time. As I mentioned, I was pretty comfortable and confident with my ability to lead and manage IT. If I'm being honest, maybe borderline ego. And I thought, okay, I looked across the fence, and for the first 4 years I was with this company, we had 4 VPs of HR come and go, revolving door. Yeah. Wow. And I look back and thought, how hard could it be?
Yeah.
And then I got into it and thought, oh, what have I done? It was so much more difficult. So there was a few elements at play, but the theme started to emerge of, you're not going to know everything. Just jump into it. Yeah. And then you know a little bit about my story. After a few years of leading that, they said, start an ESG function, start a project management office, take safety, take transportation, take leadership. And each time I did it, I recognized the magic sauce is stepping in to start leading a new team, being real and raw and vulnerable, and saying, I'm not an expert. Yeah. You are the expert. Let's work through this together. And when you're vulnerable, you open that door for them to also be vulnerable. They share. You get more data and information to make more informed decisions so that you can all move forward together. Yeah. Yeah. And then the last thing that I want to touch on is, as we think through these skills and lessons and reflections, have you heard of mosaic theory? So basically, if you think about a mosaic of maybe like a pane of glass, and you have all these little broken shards and stuff. So you look at them individually, all of your lessons throughout life, but whenever you step back far enough, it paints a picture. Yeah. And you're able to take all of these little lessons and you're able to see how they mesh and interact and connect with one another. Some might say that that's wisdom, but it's difficult to see until you have experienced it. So like, I can't teach you wisdom. I can help you along the way, but That's something that as you were talking through that, I had all of these incredible thoughts that I wanted to get out. And now I'm going to pause because I have been rambling.
So Adam Grant, talking about quilting is a similar sort of concept. And the way I got there was in grad school. By the way, I went to grad school in my late 50s. I graduated at 59 years old, and my goal was to graduate before 60, so I achieved that, check the box. So in grad school, I was studying all these great thought leaders in HR and leadership, and the thesis was actually around leadership differences between private equity type firms and publicly held companies. And I got frustrated because these amazing thought leaders, and it's all the names out there, were talking in their silos about how trust is the most important thing. And if you get trust right, everything else just falls into place. Vulnerability is the most important thing. If you get that right, everything falls. Well, it just doesn't. There are 31 nodes in my model. It distills down into 5 big buckets: the heart, the head, the team, the work, and the results. And underneath those are as many as 10 or so different nodes that each of these great thought leaders contributed to. And even when I teach it, I put it up on the wall, and these thought leaders' pictures start appearing all over it until it's a mosaic. And so I'm very familiar with the concept and have built this model based on those individual leaders' contributions and how they're connected. So, when I was doing my literature search in particular, I'd be like, well, this is great, but this is going on over here, and you're not talking about that over there. And why not? Because it's very close to what you're doing. And by the way, not only is it important to what you're doing, it's a precursor to what you're doing. If you don't get this right, if you don't get caring right, then respect and trust don't ever land right. And you don't ever get to empathy and vulnerability and self-awareness. And that's the basis for psychological safety, which is the entree into leadership. If you don't get to that point, you can tell people what to do, but getting them to want to follow you, being somebody worth following, is about getting to that heart part of my model. And that is really where the book lies right now. It's these heartfelt stories, these difficult stories, cathartic in some cases stories that I wrote, true stories, and the life lesson I came out of it with, so that maybe somebody else doesn't have to plow that same ground.
I gave a keynote about a year ago now, actually, here in the Woodlands to a group of 150, 60 entrepreneurs, something like that. And it was the first time for me to publicly share my story about some stuff with my biological father, childhood, him abandoning us. And, I've always carried this kind of shame, and there were some other, challenges that I had to work through because of that. I knew that sharing that story was going to be emotionally taxing. As I was preparing for the keynote, as I was practicing it was tough. I was struggling to get through it. I go up the day of the speech, I get on stage, I share my story, got a little emotional, powered through it. What I did not anticipate is for over an hour afterwards, people lining up to shake my hand, to hug me, crying, tearing up, thanking me. And it was in that moment that I recognized that I thought my story was unique to me. One, it's unfortunate how many fathers abandon their kids and the absolute wreckage that will do to a family. But two, as humans, there's kind of a common thread. We all have our own unique life experiences, but it is all life experiences. So there's some generalities. And when we're able to be real and raw and vulnerable, people will connect with that, and they will draw correlations to their own lives and connect with you even deeper. And when they connect with you on that level, they're more likely to follow. Now, there's a lot of elements to being a strong leader. I mean, there's trust. You have to be competent in what you do. There's a lot of other elements, and I'm actually keen to learn more about your model here. But it's fascinating to see what happens when you just get real, and it doesn't happen enough.
You talked about it earlier as the example that you gave. And you know what's really hard is teaching people how to be vulnerable. What does vulnerability look like? It's not just telling all the wreckage stories in your life. That's not really, yeah, you could do that, but it's about coming into a room and having the great questions. It's about honoring the people around the table. It's even about the guy that shows up late for lunch that you're buying as the company CHRO, and this guy's got a name on his shirt. The guy with the name on his shirt is the most important guy in the room. And you need to treat them with that sort of respect and honor, because that person's paying your salary. And I think we lose sight of some of that. And, those are some sort of tips that I give when I'm talking to particularly field-oriented operations leaders, is that never lose the perspective that that person in front of you is the most important person in the room. And your job is to serve them and to make sure that they know they can call you anytime with any question, and you're an open book. Oh, and by the way, you're going to tell them when you first meet them, I've been where you are. I've been the person who's not exactly sure whether they're doing the right thing day to day, who maybe at the time that you were going through it, you maybe needed to call somebody and didn't have someone to call. You be that person they can call, that open book that gives them that comfort, that bravery, that courage to be the person that they need to be for this company, so that they do the things that you want them to do. I feel strongly about that, but it's still I had a conversation with Stephen and Mark Covey one time about the book I thought I was writing, which was What's Are Easy, How's Are Hard, which was my leadership model, which are the what's. But the hows lie behind that. I can say, be empathetic, and then, okay, what does that look like when it's happening? So teaching them how to be empathetic, pause, listen. Listening is the second half of being empathetic. And, it's hard unless you have a basket of tips and tricks to tell people, this is when you pause, this is when you wait, this is when you see the confusion in their eyes, and you're puzzled about whether they understood what you just said, and so maybe you just repeat it. Or, are we on the same page? A little check-in when you're having that conversation with those folks. But establishing that relationship is the most important part. And here's why I say it's the most important part. The relationship you have with your leader will get you to a point where you don't want to disappoint them, okay? So my CEO boss, if he comes in on a Friday afternoon like this one and says, hey, the board just called and they need this report, and can you pump that out before you leave today? And he knows every Friday evening I go to some happy hour somewhere with our friends as our end of week sort of decompression, tell the war stories of the week, and high five and celebrate and go on into your weekend. He knows I do that every Friday evening. So since he knows that, the fact that he asked me to stay and do this report tells me a couple of things. One, this is really important, and that I don't want to disappoint him. He wouldn't have asked if it were not important for that evening, for that time. And I'll stay and do it because, I have a relationship with him. I don't want to disappoint him. I want to serve him, and he's built that relationship with me. So relationships, there's an entire chapter in the book on that. And the best example I have is Peyton Manning. You might have heard this interview, but they were asking him what his favorite memories were from his Hall of Fame career. And he didn't say rings. He didn't say Super Bowls. He didn't say records. He said, it's the relationships. The relationships. Somebody he could buy and sell all of us. He's got all the money in the world, and what he cared about were the people. And Rick Warren said the same thing. And it resonated with me because it really reinforced what I had been thinking all along.
So what you were just talking about, there's a section that I actually highlighted. I'm going to read a good bit of this. Okay. That one incident in my first month at this new company earned me more trust and credibility than any policy memo or talking point ever could. Why? Because relationships matter. Buckingham, Manning, and Warren were all trying to tell us it's relationships. not in a cheesy network your way to the top kind of way, rather in a genuine way. I've realized that most of my important accomplishments aren't listed on a resume. They're the networking contacts, friendships, family members, and the people just outside of the chalk circle who showed up when it mattered. It's about being someone who's worth knowing, because people understand that to you, people matter more than power. Now, I want to unpack this a little bit and then get your thoughts. Sure. People matter more than power. And you made another comment earlier about hierarchy and how the one with the name on their vest is the most important person in the room. I've worked for a number of companies over the years, and I have started to notice a trend where with scale, those in the ivory tower become increasingly detached. There are also a number of instances where those in the ivory tower come out of college, they get their MBA, they've never worked a field in Alaska, they don't know what the employees are actually dealing with. They're great at putting together slide decks and reading spreadsheets, but they don't actually comprehend what's going on. And so I am actually keen to hear your thoughts on one. Have you seen or witnessed something similar where with scale, those at the top become increasingly detached? If so, how have you best mitigated the risk of that occurring? Because it will be an absolute detrimental effect on the organization the more it occurs.
Interesting that you brought that particular piece up, because I was talking to my creative company that's helping me put the book together, and the lady that is my point of contact, my Sherpa as she calls herself, was saying, hey, I've read some of your book and I've read some of Jared Hamilton's book that's coming out called So You Want to Be an All-Star, and she said, I keep coming up against these Vistage people. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but they happen to be members of Vistage because that's where they go to get their tips and tricks about how to navigate that job. We're saying things like, "Yeah, I don't do that. I'm the CEO." And just the fact that somebody would say that out loud tells you everything you need to know about their ego and the way they put themselves in the company and their approachability. I mean, how many people are going to have a relationship with somebody like that? And if you do, I bet it's not the relationship you think you have. So fortunately, I'm with a company where, and I hope some of it's been my influence since I've been there, but people who are pretty genuine, who don't hide feelings, who are pretty vulnerable. Some of it comes from when you build a company from something pretty small to big, and you get humble. When you add a company that maybe they've got an expertise that we didn't have, or they've got a manager that has a richer sort of development history that puts that person in a better position to run part of the company than you, and you're in a position to learn things from these people. It just brings a little bit more humility to those roles. It's hard to teach that. It's just like vulnerability. It's hard to teach that. Now, if I were up against a CEO that were that arrogant, I would probably get them to agree to do some sort of either management coaching or 360 feedback, whatever version that is looking like today. People say different things about that. But in some way, they need to see themselves. And if they can't see it themselves, then they need to get some independent data, and that's when you call in, Sean Barnes to come in and do that work. Shameless plug, and help them see how they're being perceived. I think that's incredibly valuable, and I've seen it go two ways, and you probably have too. Oh, that's not me, so a complete denial of the whole thing. Or they completely break down and like, tell me how I can fix this because I don't know where to go from here. That's who I think I may be, and I don't want to be that person. And so that opens the door for you to do some things with them because now you have their attention. So yes, I have seen that more than I would like, But certainly, I don't know that I would have stayed with this company this long, and to be 5 years next year at a time when I didn't really need this job. But I liked the people there, and I took the job, and we've been growing like crazy. Even in the construction business, we're doing fine. And I think it's the genuine nature of the people that work there, and they value the HR function. We've created a want and a need for the HR function there that I don't think I've experienced anywhere else. They're calling. My phone's been blowing up just in the 30 minutes we've been doing this with people, and it's Friday afternoon, and some of these people it's after 5 o'clock where they're working, and it's pretty telling that they trust us that much.
That was something that I didn't realize I was stepping into whenever I started leading human resources. In that, I didn't fully comprehend what the brand of HR was at the company. Now, you can make some assumptions in having 4 VPs of HR go in and out in 4 years' time that the brand and reputation wasn't stellar. Part of the challenge with my predecessors was they were operating with this mindset of they are the HR police. You can't do that. You can't do that. This is the law. You can't do that. And there's only so long that a C-level executive is going to be told no before they, you know what, I'm going to find somebody who will let me do this. And it's not about breaking the law, but I think one of the things they genuinely valued and appreciated about my approach was, one, I didn't know employment law. And I was transparent with them and said, look, I don't know employment law, but I have the phone to external counsel and will absolutely call them up every time I have a question. Yeah. And I leaned on them very heavily as I started learning more about what we could do and what we couldn't do. Yeah. But I never came in with the mindset of, we're the HR police, this is what you can or can't do. It was, okay, we have a few options here. This one presents the most risk, and here's how we can mitigate the risk, and here's what happens if we lose. This approach that I'm suggesting involves less risk. We're going to have to draw some things out a little bit longer, but here are your options, and here's what happens if we go down either of these paths. At that point, the business leader gets to make an informed decision, and then I support it. Now, there were times when they would go with my recommendation, and other times when they would go with not my recommendation, and sometimes it would blow up, and sometimes it would fly under the radar. But I think there are far too many HR leaders that lean into the HR police mindset, and it doesn't serve them well.
I coined a term. I think I coined a term. Sometimes I just remember terms, and I profess to have coined it. But reasonable risk is the term that we use in our vernacular at Arxis. And it really comes from a place of, in human resources anymore, in fact, in business anymore in general, hardly any decision we take is risk-free. Anybody can sue you for anything, anytime, so that's always out there. And so my job, sitting in the C-suite chair, is to say, hey, I know that my compliance people are jumping up and down saying, we can't terminate this person. However, this person is bringing down an entire department with their behavior, with their attitude, and it's costing us, from an operations standpoint, every minute that they're in that role. And yes, we didn't quite document everything we should have to terminate them on performance. And no, we don't have an option to lay them off where there's less of a risk and eliminate the role. But the risk of keeping them on is much higher for the business than terminating them and being willing to pay a little money in a settlement if that happens that way. So reasonable risk becomes the theme in what we do. And much like the example that you just gave, HR is just in a recommendation job. This is what we recommend. It's your decision. You tell me what you want to do, and if I've done my job, they're well informed, as you just said, about the risks of choosing either way. And I think there's an appreciation for that in the leadership team about giving them the choice. I'm not coming and saying, you can't do this. I'm saying, here's what I would do. Here's the risk. Here's the reasonable risk. I'm validating for you the problems you're having keeping this person on. So you validate their issues, you give them all the information, you let them make the decision, and they're going to call you next time. They're not going to leave you out of the conversation next time. That's what you're trying to get to.
And that's exactly what happened. That was my experience. They actually appreciated. People started calling HR, hey, I've got this thing. I'm sure you have had experiences where HR is the bad guy. It's an unfortunate reality of the world. But as I was transitioning, as I was growing as a leader and stepping in and leading more and more functions, there were times whenever I had to make difficult decisions that not everybody agreed with. And because I was so well connected with so many people in the organization, like information would flow to me. I'm sure you're in a similar situation. Information just flows. Well, after an especially challenging decision had been made, I don't know, like a week or so goes by, and I hear from somebody, why is the HR guy telling me what to do? And I understand where they were coming from, but also it was the biggest compliment I had ever experienced because I had spent the entirety of my life as the IT guy. And even if they were mad, yes, that is progress. I am now the HR guy. I'll smooth it over with them, but winning on that part.
No kidding. That's great.
I want to shift into something that you've mentioned great questions on two separate occasions here in the past, since we've been chatting. This, in my experience, has become a superpower. And I'm going to share a quick example of that. I go to a lot of conferences, a lot of events, and it's fascinating to see when you have an incredible speaker on stage, they share their story and their journey and their lessons, and then they open it up for questions, and nobody...
Crickets.
Yeah, it's crickets. And I know that feeling being on stage, and you're like, oh my gosh, I just completely bombed it. So I like to raise my hand and ask thought-provoking questions. And every time I do this, I will ask a thought-provoking question because I was listening. And 9 times out of 10, the people in the audience look at me, they're like, and just give me the nod, like, that's a legit question. And a lot of times the speaker will come up and thank me for saving them. But what's more interesting is the people in the audience come up and they're like, hey, who are you? What do you do? Now, that is the power of asking the right questions. Now, I'm going to tie this into some other things here. You mentioned you can't teach empathy. You can't teach vulnerability. Can you teach people how to ask the right questions?
I think so. I think you can teach them how to ask the right questions. If they approach whatever they just heard from their set of values, how does that inform their values? Which I always say, people ask, how do we use these values? I was like, okay, here's how you use them. When you find yourself alone and absent any other information, if you just rely on your values, you're most likely going to at least directionally get to the right answer for that moment in time. So there's a lot of power in that. So think about what that person said around the values, and does it violate anything that you came in thinking, or does it change your mind about some things? Sometimes when I'm teaching this facilitation skill is really what it is to a new manager and that's got a new team, I will just say, hey, pick out somebody around the table that maybe is not contributing to the conversation yet, and maybe you don't know them, and just start asking them, hey, tell me what your expertise is in this area, and this conversation that we've been having, what did you hear that you could contribute to or comment on. And it does two things. It includes them, meaning you draw them into the conversation, and you just valued them. Hey, I know you have an expertise in this, so I'm inviting you into the conversation. So you're included. So that's a facilitation skill right there. But and you're also demonstrating the skill at the same time by asking those questions. And you said it earlier. Just admit that you don't know. I'm not as smart as you guys around the table. You guys have individual skill sets that I don't. I tell that to my Cracker Jack employee relations director all the time. I said, I don't know how you can know every law change in every state, every week, all the time, everywhere. So I just know I can pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, what's going on in Nevada with the heat stress thing? That kind of thing. So, it's, and they know that about me. I'm not trying to know everything that they know. And if you ever get in that box, you will never be scalable, because you will spend all of your time trying to be as good as everybody else. Why don't you just lever the people that work for you to make you look better? And I even tell people around the table, and there's some things I'm supposed to know, sure, but there are times when I don't have all the answers, and they're asking me at the at the conference table with the senior management team, and I'll say, you know what? I pay great people that are award-winning HR people to know this kind of stuff. Give me a second, I'll get you that answer. I don't try to bluff them. I don't try to say, I don't know. And I say, I can find out. Let me go find out for you.
Well, I think people respect that.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's an understanding that not everybody can know everything. And also it signals that you don't have an ego. You just want to find the right answer, and you don't have it off the top of your head, and you're not going to pull the wool over their eyes so that you sound super smart and intelligent, because that doesn't serve anybody well. You end up backing yourself into a corner by saying the wrong thing. But I think you're right. This is a facilitation skill. And I interact with a lot of people that they're a little bit nervous. What if I ask the wrong question? What if people think that I'm stupid or that I don't fully understand? Okay, fair, but it's okay to ask the dumb questions if you preface it and say, hey, this is new for me. You don't want to say, hey, this might be a dumb question, but you can say, hey, this is new for me. I'd like to better understand. Can you help me figure out how to tie these pieces together? And a lot of times people, they don't like the spotlight. And what I share with them is the beautiful thing about asking questions is the spotlight's not on you. Right. You ask the question, and then the spotlight shifts immediately over to the person that you're asking the question to. So it takes some of the pressure off. And then you just start asking a few follow-up questions. Then the nerves come down, and you can have just a natural, organic conversation.
Okay, I could go about a half an hour on that one. But a couple of things. One is, as the facilitator, when somebody does ask that question that doesn't need to be asked, you can rescue them. You can reach out with an olive branch and say, hey, you know what? You're new to this team, and there's a whole lot of stuff that we can't all know it all. But I'll brief you on that earlier. But for the good of you around the table who just heard this question, we value the person who's coming in with fresh eyes, that are going to ask the questions that maybe we think are dumb questions in the back of our head, but maybe they're not. Maybe we need to rethink some of these things that the fresh eyes are seeing that maybe we haven't completely valued in the past. If you'll allow me, I want to go back to the clipboard HR person walking around trying to catch people doing things wrong, which I think is an evolution of HR. You start out there, and then you end up thinking more in terms of reasonable risk. Yeah. So I found myself mid-career HR before I was an HR VP. I was director in a pretty large company, and it was a engineering, operations, downstream oil and gas service company kind of thing. And I was having trouble penetrating the field leaders around things like sexual harassment and racial comments, and that they probably brought from home. They feel comfortable saying those things at home, but don't belong in the workplace. And so, struggling with that, I was trying to figure out, okay, what's something they could relate to? And I was watching football, as I do often as I possibly can. And I see the penalty flag. And I thought, oh, that could be it. So I went out on Amazon and I bought a dozen NFL penalty flags with the embedded little a sandbag inside. You wrap it up with a rubber band and make a flag out of it. And I took it to the next meeting that I went to. And the first time somebody dropped an F-bomb or said something inappropriate or made an age discrimination comment unknowingly, I threw the flag. And they're like, what is that about? I said, that's an HR penalty flag. And it creates a laugh in the room for a second. And then they're like, well, what did I do? Well, they just opened the door for you to give a lesson in a funny way. And so by the end of my time there, not even within the year, people were saying, can I get one of those penalty flags? I'd like to use that in my stuff because it's kind of fun, and the most fun I had with it was when somebody was talking outside my door and said something inappropriate, and I would throw it through the doorway into the hallway, and they would go, wait, what? Wait, what did I do? What did I say? And that, again, it opens the door to that communication. So knowing your audience and fit for purpose and how do you penetrate those people? Where do they live every day? They all loved football. Even our females in those roles were football fans for some reason. But anyway, that's a tip or a trick that people can use.
And this also goes back to something we were talking about earlier as far as the corporate office being detached from the field. Because of the nature of my role and all of the teams that I led, I was in the field a lot. Arguably in the field more than every other person at the corporate office by a wide margin. And it helped me develop skills that I didn't even recognize I was developing in the moment. One being the ability to go out and have conversations with the engineers out in the wireline shop and them not view me as like, oh, corporate's here. It was like, oh, Sean, what's going on, man? It humanized me by being able to have relationships with them, communicate on their level, and then also jokingly be like, oh, hey, man, let's like pull it back just a little bit. And they're like, oh, okay, like they get it.
They get it.
But the other thing that I started to recognize was when I would be sitting in the boardroom, when I would be having conversations with senior executives and, they're doing the quarterly review, business reviews and all the things, they would say, okay, well, this is what's going on here. This is what's driving the numbers. And I could actually, actually, there's a few things deeper that are really contributing to what you're seeing in the numbers. Can I go through that with you? And so this speaks to how important it is, even if you operate in the big corporate office, you have to connect with the people and get out there. And I know it's not fun. It can be if you build relationships and get over the friction that exists in the beginning. Yeah. But it turned into me kind of being the conduit between corporate and the field. And I learned such an incredible amount of business and operations and the corporate function. And in looking back, there were people that would make compliments like, you can walk into any room and have a conversation with anybody. I could have a conversation with the board one day and go out to a cementing yard the next and be fine. And when you have skills that allow you to navigate any room, you can provide incredible amounts of value to any organization that you go to.
And they're not rolling their eyes when you walk in the room. Oh, the HR guy's here. He's actually here to contribute. And you earned your stripes when you said those things. You gave them information they didn't have access to. And knowing the difference between a lubricator and a wellhead and a blowout preventer and, those kind of technical terms will earn you a lot of respect. So there is an element of understanding what we do in our businesses. Not just the people stuff, not just the state compliance laws, not just the W-9 and the W-2. It's knowing more about the business so that when you make comments like that, they're relevant. And being relevant is most of it.
Well, and one more piece, it wasn't just me pulling information from the field to corporate. There was information from corporate coming to the field.
Interesting, yeah.
Yes, because a lot of times the man on the high castle says something and the people in the field are like, what, why are we doing, I don't get it. But I could sit down and have a conversation, and they would just point like, what on earth is going, okay, hold on, let me talk you through this. And I would take them through it in person, face to face. Okay, well, I kind of get it now. Or sometimes like, I don't get it, but at least I understand it now. And so developing skills around being that conduit, it provides so much value to the organization. And I always encouraged all of my leaders that were at our various corporate locations, like get out in the field. And I had directors and VPs that were on my team, and I'd straight up tell them like, look, I can't be in the field more than you. Here's how much I'm in the field. Are you out there that much?
Right, exactly. I have a great story around that.
Yeah.
It's a Friday story, actually.
Okay.
And it's around Maxwell's level 1 leadership and position. So I was a new guy trying to do the Press the Flesh tour, and I was out in the field meeting some people, and I always like to gather up all of the admins in the office and take them to lunch or order lunch in or do something around that because I wanted to listen to them. So I get there, and I've got this, they happen to be all female. That didn't always happen that way, but they happen to be all female, about 5 or 6 of them around the table. And I said, what's going on this weekend? It's Friday, you know. I said, oh, well, we've got the big Friday night game tonight, the football game, and we're all jazzed up about it, small town, Louisiana. And I said, oh, fantastic. And they said, yeah, in fact, Ginger normally wears her son's jersey on Friday. Wow, cool. Ginger, I look over, and she's in a nice blouse and a skirt and like a little overdressed, not only for small town, but for Friday in a small town. And I'm like, well, what's going on? Where's the jersey? She said, well, in a kind of muffled voice, she said, oh, I was told I really shouldn't wear that today. I said, why not? She said, because you were coming. You're kidding. So so somebody told you didn't choose knowing that I was coming? And they said, yeah. I said, I am so sorry. We have the same benefits. I'm paid by the same payroll system that you are. I might have a few more people reporting to me than you do, but I am no more or less important than you are in this business. And by the way, I know, because I've got kids, you only have 10 of these a year in football or so. And you only have a few years that your kid's going to play. So call it 30 times maybe at the high end that you're going to wear that jersey. And I just interfered with you enjoying that fully for one day in your life. And that hurts me deeply. And I wish I could go back and fix that. But I tell you what it will do. It teaches me that I need to make sure when I'm going to visit an office that nothing out of the ordinary is changing. You wear your Friday gear, you wear your jerseys, dress like you normally do. I don't care. I just want to know how you feel. I want to know how this company feels to you. I want to know what else we can be doing for you. But for me to feel like I interfered with your enjoyment of something like that's such a basic thing, it just killed me.
We need more of that.
Yeah, for
really
sure.
Do.
For sure.
Okay. Last thing that I want to touch on. No one on their deathbed asks to see their diplomas. They ask for their people. This conversation has been better than I could have possibly imagined. And here's the thing. Whenever we spoke on the phone a few weeks ago, I was pumped and excited about this conversation. So tell me, when is the book coming out? That's going to be my first question. Sure. And once I get the answer to that, I'll ask one more.
We think we'll make it April 4th of 2026, which is my 68th birthday. And we're hoping to have books on hand, which means the release will be before that so that people can have their books. And if they don't, I'll have some there. But super excited about that and the date that we chose.
Of all of these reflections, and lessons and things that you have learned, what is the most important and powerful thing that you would like to share?
I was asked after I finished my graduate degree at 59 years old by the CFO who took me to lunch if I could write on the back of a matchbook what I learned in graduate school. What would I write? And I said I'd write the word caring. And he's a CFO, not typically known for those deep feeling moments, but rocked back in his chair, a little bit of a belly laugh, and said, "Okay, you got to tell me more about that." And I said, well, it's easily demonstrated by me asking you a couple questions. The first is, if we allowed you to hire your daughter, who's unemployed, just graduated from college, as your assistant or sitting right outside your door, what would you do to make her successful? And he gave me this very eloquent list of things he would do, check-ins and having the desk ready and introducing her to the important people and having a plan, 30, 60, 90-day plan. I said, fantastic. What about that accountant 3 cubicles down and you're not exactly sure what her last name is, much less any career plans or anything? What's the only difference in how you approach those 2 people? It's how much you care. And I've told that story 100 different ways. That's a true story. But I've told it 100 different ways to communicate to people who don't normally think about caring being that powerful of value, to show them how it is and what power it can have. Because until somebody connects with you over that caring, and I suggested to him, so in the morning when you come to work, what if you set your backpack down by her cubicle and you say, "Darlene, I'm falling on my sword. I haven't paid any attention to your career desires. We haven't had a check-in. I don't feel like I know you very well. And starting today, we're going to spend 30 minutes each month talking about what you want to do with your career and how I can best help you do that." I said, "What do you think her performance is going to be the rest of that day?" It's going to be through the roof. The CFO stopped at my desk, talked to me about what I want to do in my career. Are you kidding me? Do you see the power in that? And until you have that kind of connection, then respect, trust, empathy, vulnerability, self-awareness, psychological safety, and then getting to the sense of belonging, connection, which is Maslow's stuff, and then down into the team stuff. Until you get that cemented and started, none of the other stuff is going to be as effective. So that's what I think is the core lesson out of that, is deep caring. And caring can come from all kinds of places. Your family history, the failures that you've had, the sympathy that you now have for people who've gone through that same thing, your kids, the times that they've failed, and they're looking at you going, "You're going to judge me about this, aren't you?" And now that I'm older, I lean in and I go, "I've been there. It's okay. You're going to survive. You're going to thrive even after this." And it's all because of caring.
I love it.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful way for us to end this, Rod. Many more conversations to come in
Absolutely.
our future, and I can't thank you enough for joining
I've
us.
had such a great time, and you're such a very talented podcast coach here. So
I appreciate it.
Leading the witness.
Always learning. Always learning.
Great job,
you.
Sean.
All right,
Thanks so
thank
much.
you so much. Appreciate it.
You bet, buddy.